Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I have a pleasure talking to Professor Remi Alapo from Nigeria. She's a human rights advocate in Brooklyn and New York City. And she's also my good friend. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you very
Professor
much.
Alapo, how are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Can you briefly introduce yourself and tell the viewers who you are?
My name is Dr. Remi Alapo, originally from Nigeria, West Africa. And currently, I'm a faculty with the City University of New York. I teach at various campuses in the Social Sciences Department. I've taught at Bronx Community College, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and also York College. And I'm an NGO representative with the Women's Consortium of Nigeria. And their main work is on human rights, preventing human trafficking, and gender-based violence. And I also belong to or participate or affiliated with many gender equality, human rights, and youth-led organizations around New York City.
You're also an author of the book called Generation X.
Yes.
Yes.
So I have a publication called Generation X, the role of culture on women's leadership. And the book looks at the role that culture plays in the advancement of women. It was a publication out of my dissertation. And, I interviewed several women in leadership positions to see if we've moved from, women trying to break the glass ceiling and the role of culture in many patriarchy or patriarchal societies, and the impact that, traditional societies have on the role of women's advancement.
Yes.
In many societies, they've, it depends on what societies those are. They've actually helped, assisted in women's advancement. So for example, in my own traditional society, I'm Yoruba, by the way, from Nigeria, West Africa. We've always had women in leadership roles, women who are mothers of kings. We've had queen mothers, we've had women who were responsible for the economic activities of each household of the society. So in my community, women were placed at a very high pedestal, and the advent of colonialism in Africa brought about the introduction of European standard or type of female role, or, revamping or rewriting African history, where women were not seen as equal to men or even superior or as partners, but less of subordinate role. And this continues over generations, even up to independence movement, where, independence national laws were written that actually, put women as second-class citizens. And moving forward up to, let's say, the first, CEDAW Convention, I believe it was 1979, which called for the elimination of discrimination against women. Many women did not have the education needed to be able to fight this second-class oppression. But as time went on, things started improving for women, which led to the 1985 Beijing conference in China. And part of the Beijing Platform for Action was to seek opportunities or to make a stand, for national governments to include women in the National Action Plan as partners, to give support to women in terms of education, equality. And here we are today. Many societies have actually improved the lives of women through changing national legislation. But, the numbers are still not, they cannot be comparable to the number of men, because nowadays we have many women who are highly educated, but in many societies they're still seen as second class, and this goes along with gender equality, racial equality, any type of equality that sees other people as subordinates is not
Yeah.
equal. That society is not equal at all.
Yeah. So I would love to talk about it sometimes in a later interview with you about gender issues and progression of the gender issues in the future. But today we gathered because earlier today I told you that I wanted to talk about the current issues relating to George Floyd's killing in the Minneapolis, Minnesota, since you're also a big advocate in the New York City for the human rights. I wanted to talk to you about your opinion on the current situation of the protest and the riots too, and what do you think we should achieve by the end of this protest?
So I couldn't really hear you very well, but based on our previous conversation on what is going on in the United States right now in terms of the murder, I
Yeah,
wouldn't say the killing, I would say the murder of Mr. George Floyd in Minneapolis on May 25th, which has led to many people demonstrating and protesting all over the U.S. and
yes,
around the world. I
yes,
believe it's an unfortunate incident that continues to plague our communities, and specifically minority communities, in the way that issues of policing is addressed in our communities. Oftentimes we don't see the same type of presence in other communities, in affluent communities. But of course, we also have to be fair and understand that if you go to affluent communities, the crime rates are lower. And in many of our communities, many people are unemployed, underemployed, or the piece of the national pie is not spread out equally. It's unjust to start with, given that this nation was built on structural racism to start with, you
yeah,
know. So I support those who are demonstrating peacefully. We're
yeah,
not gonna get anywhere with violent extremism or violent demonstrations. But sometimes we have to understand from the spectrum or the lens of the other people. We're talking of a society or communities where people have been suppressed or oppressed for such a long time. Even with the Civil Rights Act of 1965, which gave, I would say, some sort of equality, to African Americans. The rate of, injustice in the society is still very high, you know. And it's so unfortunate that many people are categorized at one time or the other as criminals. It's so very unfortunate that the mindset of many people or many other populations see Black people in general as criminals, you know. So I've been very fortunate not to have faced any police aggression. And I don't know if it's because I mind my business, but oftentimes we find that even people who are minding their businesses, in the case of Mr. Floyd, it has not been established specifically of what led to his, maybe his search or attempt to arrest him,
yeah,
leading to the way that the police handled, him being trying to get arrested
yeah,
and for him to, you know. So
yes,
we have so many cases of extreme police action on people of color. Many times, if you turn on your TV, I would often wonder, how come it takes maybe about 3, 4, 5 police officers to tackle and take down one Black person, you know?
yes,
I mean, I don't understand if the spirit of the Black person overshadows or overpowers 5 police officers. But I don't understand, if it's a minor routine stop, you know,
yeah,
everyone has the human right to justify not to be arrested, or that they do not want to respond to any police harassment. But of
yeah,
course, we have to also think that, the job of the police is to maintain order in our communities. But maintaining order using extreme actions is very wrong. I think also because of the lack of understanding of how police are trained in working in minority populations, they automatically see many people of color as a threat, so they are always prepared and armed. Any slight question to request a police officer to justify why a Black person or person of color is being stopped or placed under arrest, usually, you know, turns into some sort of argument or friction or, death.
Yeah.
Which often, if you go to a white community or if a police would even stop a white person in a Black community, how many times have you heard that a white person was shot dead or, arrested violently? Unless, of course, I don't even have like specific examples, but unless, of course,
I don't have a specific example for your question.
police officers started, maybe arguing or fighting the white person. So it's very unfortunate.
Groups. So I would like to lead the next question to your students, because you have a vocal group of students that are present in the community for human rights. I would like to ask, what action did they take over the 6 days of protest, and what they've been doing right now? And do you have any certain examples to provide for me?
Yes. Well, I don't know what my students are currently doing. I don't monitor their day-to-day activities,
Yeah,
but our CUNY system, just ended. We finished our final exams last week,
yeah,
and part of the, my two intro to sociology class, which we discussed heavily on, in the individual and the society,
yeah,
or even culture and society, is to look at the final exam for the class was to look at the culture of racial discrimination and
yeah,
how it affects the individual in this society. So, many of my students actually wrote about, racial profiling, racial discrimination in many forms in terms of housing, even the COVID pandemic that we were locked down because of,
yeah,
with many people of color who did not have adequate or even any access to health or insurance. I mean, health insurance were, dying at alarming rate, overpowering in number of the Caucasian or other communities. Access to food, access to good quality food, access to education, access to a lot of basic amenities, which, in comparison to other countries, I would say that, it's, those basic access to such amenities are available in the United States, but not adequately enough to meet the high population. The number of the United States, outnumbers probably many other countries. But if we look at a place like Cuba, if you go to medical school, I believe it's free over there, and so many other places, even public education. So over here, the easiest way or the fastest way to actually stop violence, lack of tolerance, will be through public education.
yes,
Universities, I believe, need to be free. Okay, if
yeah,
the United States government can cough up stimulus money for this COVID pandemic in supporting academic institutions or unemployment programs or small businesses, they definitely can cough up enough money to make education a priority. Education very free to everybody, whether white, black, brown, yellow, green, purple, gold, it doesn't matter. But many people are straddled with so many, so large amount of student loan that alone closes their mind to accepting or learning about other people. Even the way they treat other people, they have so much anger in their hearts already, because of
yeah,
so much. you know. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's so sad. And my students, I hear from many of them all the time on how many of them can't even eat. They can't afford food. They can't afford a place to live. They can't even pay for their tuition. And
Yeah.
many of them are afraid to take student loan. They drop out. Many of them are from abusive families or households, and many of them have they've gone to prison and
Yeah.
recently just came out. So we don't know what is going on in the minds of many of these young people for us to see some of these actions, in the media. The anger, the anger may not even be specifically to Mr. George Floyd's passing. It
Yeah.
may be a combination of so many activities that have been bottled up in people's minds for such a long time that they're using this medium, which, it's a pandemic within a pandemic, because we're just, the state is just, they're just looking for how to start rolling out, opening, different establishments or different activities. And
Yeah.
then came murder last week. So people have been locked in for such, like 2 months.
Yes.
And whether it's because of racial discrimination or economic injustice or educational injustice or gender inequality, people are just coming out to lash out and, just let their voices heard. What I don't support, however, is the violence and, destruction of lives and property.
Property. Yes.
It's not gonna bring Mr. George Floyd back. It's
Yeah.
good to get out, take action, take up the mantle, live up to the expectation of those, who died during, let's say, different events in the United States, let's say during the civil rights movement, you know. So it's, living up to the expectation, but demonstrate peacefully. Of course, if you've been angered and hurt for such a long time and you've not been provided the medium or the opportunity to vent out your anger, which of course we know that the healthcare industry in the United States is not, equal, you know. So many people don't have access to mental health. They cannot afford mental health professionals or to seek mental health issues, which of course culturally, many Black people will not discuss that they have mental health issues, you know.
Yeah.
Many of them, they bottle all these anger in their minds or hearts, and any little occurrence in their communities, they just lash out. And for them, they justify such anger or such inequality by looting establishments and saying, yes, at least I got a piece of, shoes or bag for free,
Yeah.
for my ancestors working for 400 years without receiving a pay. At least I got something that, the United States government owe me, and I got this pair of bag for free, so I can justify, inequality through that. Of course, it's not gonna help. It may send a temporary signal to establishment owners or even to the government, but it's further going to arm law enforcement to be aware or wary of such people of color or these types of people in their communities, because they may be afraid or start thinking and rebranding their own lives also, that if you see this type of people, run away from them. If you see maybe two, three or more of them gather in one place, know that God is not in their midst. They're gonna start a riot. So close your doors to them, close opportunities, because you don't know when they're gonna be angry, because they're always angry. So you wanna try to avoid these types of people. And it's so unfortunate that the way we're trying to get rid of, police,
Yeah.
bad police in our communities, it's not every police officer or law enforcement officer that is a racist. It's not every police officer or law enforcement that does not like people of color,
Yeah.
but we have to also give them credit for putting their lives on the line. Many of them barely make ends meet. And if you look at the average salary of the, of a police officer, it's not rosy at all, you know. So they risk their lives also. And, they stand for hours at our street corners and, subway stations on the streets and stuff like that for the types of job they do. So out of 1,000 police officers, if you have maybe 5 who are very racist, then
Yeah.
I think the part of police reform, changing legislation that we should be seeking, is to see how we can either get rid or retrain or do away with these bad apples in the law enforcement. But for us to go around every police station and start setting cars to police officers' cars or even them, are we fighting the individual or are we fighting the system? Okay,
Yeah.
so the system is different from the actual person. Of course, don't get me wrong, there are many racist police officers there who, both the individual and their profession go side in side with white supremacy and the structural racism that this country is built on. But we have to, think of what is best for ourselves also. Is property damage going to justify bringing back George Floyd's life? Is it going to wake up from the dead if we kill each other? We have to find other means of reform. We have to find other means of demonstration. We
Yeah.
have to find other means of educating ourselves. Most times, many people of color pretend that they do not know that in a police precinct, in their communities, if you go, they have Black police officers. Okay, so many
Yeah.
of us actually pretend that we do not know that. Even if we do see them, we are fixated on white police officers and say racist cops.
Yeah.
Many times you see Black officers just stand there and let white police officers brutalize a Black or colored, or I mean, sorry, a person of color,
Yeah.
you know. So these are the types of reforms we should also be looking at. How do we reform the minds of the Black police officer to train the mind of their colleagues into knowing what is just and not just? Okay, merely standing there and say I did not participate in it does not justify you yourself being a racist. You're in the
Yeah.
same class for standing there and doing nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to really, 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 really think of better ways of reforming the system. Legislation, of course, is one, changing, but hopefully this time around when we have so many other community associates as affiliates, we have people who are Caucasian, we have Asians, not only brown and Black people are protesting or demonstrating.
Yeah.
We're beginning to build allies in many, with many communities, many religious groups, many organizations, many innocent individuals who want peace in their communities or in various communities are actually fostering alliance with people of color to make sure and to voice out their own dissatisfaction with their own government. First things first, many people are fed up with this current administration. And I can tell you from the perspective of many of my students and from the discussions we've had in class, many of them are not fans of this current administration. They don't even see a role for themselves. They don't even see a future, talk less of a role like currently. They don't even see themselves as a number like, anything
Yeah.
positive in this current administration, because tuition is going up
Yeah.
and many of them barely can make ends meet. Many of the students who attend the City University of New York, many of them are immigrants. Many of them work means to an end to
Yeah.
send money home to their families. Many of them have to work 2, 3 jobs before coming to classes and, trying to make ends meet, even taking care of their own families right here in the United States. So it's very unfortunate that what is going on right now is happening, but I'm hoping that we can find some sort of peaceful end or resolution to the current events.
Yeah. Uh, Continuing on this systematic change in the in our legislation. And you touched on this basis a little bit about education, because I believe in order to lift up the community, we need to educate people, but it doesn't start on the higher education, because in my opinion it starts more on the ground levels, on elementary schools, high schools, middle schools. And in minority communities, we have been observing that a lot of funding is misused, and students do not get best education, right? And as the result, students don't get the education that they need, and they put back in this poverty trap that we keep talking about. And because this poverty trap exists, it creates such a community where a lot of uh, misfortunate events happen all the time, and police stereotypes and the people stereotypes in those community are reinforced, because it keeps happening. So in my opinion, it's not only police actions and police system needs to be changed, or police culture, but it's also needs to be changed with the education, with the housing, with the funding to the community and to all those spheres, and also funding of the infrastructure around the community. Because we've been for a year already been working with a lot of NGOs, as you've been knowing, and it's mostly with the African diaspora in New York, and that's what I've been observing a lot. And when we have this conversation, we don't have, oh, it's usually homogeneous population of just the minorities there. And we would like to, I don't know if I can say that, but uh, as an observer too, but I feel like I became a little bit part of this community. We would like to see more people from different cultural backgrounds to show up and talk about this inequality in infrastructure and systematic in the government infrastructure that doesn't support minorities, right? That's how I see it.
Yes.
Yeah. So the next question, I think we'll finish on this question, and then I will have you read some statements for the conclusion. So, based on my statement, what I made, what is your expectation, or what should we expect to be accomplished by the end of this protest in this community, in the United States?
Well, it depends on how long this demonstration is going to go on for. So the government, or different communities have showed their anger, whether negative or positive. And when the people show their anger, it is up to the government to respond. And, many community leaders have made requests for police reform, for change of legislation. So if the government does not want people to continue to demonstrate, and I don't want to use the terminology protest, let's say demonstration.
Okay.
There are many ways we can demonstrate our dissatisfaction with a specific legislation or events or action. Um, you know, so if we demonstrate peacefully, if we come together as a unifying force, and I'm not saying Black and brown communities alone, I'm saying everybody, okay,
Yeah.
no matter what type of anger we're looking at or what type of injustice we're discussing, whether it's Black Lives Matter or Gay Lives Matter or equality, gender equality or education equality, health equality, food inequality, so let whatever we're fighting against or fighting for, we should try to demonstrate peacefully, okay? Already, we were all locked down for at least 2 months with this COVID-19 pandemic, and we're still not out of it yet. So we need to educate ourselves. Okay, education equality is very important. At the end of the demonstration, which there's no ending in sight right now, the curfews, in many communities or in many states may actually prevent people from demonstrating and or protesting, but at the end, what are we gonna gain from the curfews? Okay, curfews may be a temporary solution to sort of maintain order so that people will not be hurt or violated. If, like during the COVID pandemic, everyone stays home, the government may not be able to see the way that we can actually prompt them or our leaders, our congressmen or senators. There's no way we can show our dissatisfaction with some of the work that many of them are doing. But kudos to those that have come out, the community leaders or legislators that have come out against, this injustice, whether it's because of Mr. Floyd or Eric Garner or Trayvon Martin or even Amadou Diallo and so on and so forth. We need to be able to find how we're going to sit together, make recommendations on not only police reform. Okay, police reform is one thing, but reforming the entire justice system of the United States and breaking the structural racism is, first things first. So if you're arrested by the police, it goes through, let's say, other maybe agencies or organizations within the justice system. So I believe the justice system should be the main target of how to reform the United States justice system, because it's been built on centuries of inequality. Okay.
Yeah.
And one way to also reform inequality in the United States is to provide economic opportunities that will make certain communities want to be able to pull together. Because one reason you find that, and I will say specifically Black people, it's very hard to unite and come together because first things first, many of us are afraid that if I go out to demonstrate or if I speak my mind or opinion at a specific gathering, I may be seen as a criminal or a tyrant. I may have a police record and, I may be afraid that, undercover cops will be present and I don't want to go to prison again. So I'll just like stay away from fighting for justice. Okay. Yeah. And it's so unfortunate that, the United States as a leader of the modern world,
yeah.
I mean, it's a shame that, the type of racial injustice and all type of injustices that goes on that many people don't know about, So we have to educate other people, minds of the future generation also. They may feel left out of the current administration or feel that they cannot provide their opinion or input, hence they will not vote because they may not see any relevance or justification in them voting. We have to educate civically our communities, our students. I started a project, with a questionnaire on civic engagement and participation of young people in a democracy. And when we talk about democracy, we have to even justify, excuse me, what we mean by a democratic society. Okay, so a democratic society is fair to everybody, but sometimes, we need to determine what type of democratic actions are, available for everybody. Okay, is everybody a participant in the say of the running of a society? It may be like that in law, but in practice, many communities don't have access to the same, things that other communities will have access to. But I think educating our young adults on the reason why they need to participate in voter education or voting, should be on the top priority of our community leaders. Let's stop begging or let's stop blaming. Let's stop accusing, like, oh, white people don't give opportunities. There are so many educated Black individuals and community leaders. Let us start from within ourselves. Let us start from educating our own. We may feel that generations ago that our votes may not count, even if we're not physically able to vote because of, immigrant status. There's so many things that we can do in our communities to educate people on the importance of specific actions. Okay. Yeah. So I think that would be a top-notch priority in getting young people involved, or even getting people in our communities involved in this reform that we're seeking, whether it's legislation or fighting any type of oppression. Okay, it has to start with legislation change. Yeah. Legislation changing also has to be positive action that we make sure that even though it's written in the laws or changed laws, the action of those who work in specific minority communities, they have to be accountable for their action. And at the same time, I don't want to use the single story of the racist white cop working in a Black community. The action of Black and brown community who have been, who have been oppressed for a long time or treated unfairly by, law enforcement. I think that our educated Black and brown individuals need to train the minds of generations in our communities, also in their behavior, in their actions. It needs to start from the home, the way that a specific, parent, educates their children, speaks volume in the actions of our children, the actions of those in our communities, because it's very, fire does not just spread or contain itself in one location. It spreads very fast. So it takes one person to influence other people. So if we come with a fire of positive education on how, people in our community should be behaving or justify certain action, it does not have to start with a rage of destruction of property or other people's lives. At the end of the demonstration, what if, the racist society decides that, okay, we've lost a lot of property and we're fighting back, So we have to think of how, we request for specific, remuneration from the government. Okay.
Yeah. I ask you to give a closing statement on everything that you said. If you have anything to add to your statements, and on that note, we will close our conversation.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. And I'm praying that, we're able to resolve this peacefully. And we have to keep in mind that a population or a community that has been oppressed for a long time, even with several legislation changes or amendments over time, and, the anger will still be there because of the many injustices and inequalities that, are still present in our society. So policing or police brutality is just one of those injustices. We have to change legislation on education inequality, health inequality, gender inequality, all types of inequalities, all right, until our communities are equal in terms of accessibility or access to not only justice, but to basic needs or the types of standards that are present in many communities. I don't think the request to change legislation will stop. And on that note, I would like to add that, we need to respect the authorities because they most times overpower our communities in terms of ammunition. So if we don't want to continue to see, which I don't support, if we don't want to continue to see the loss of lives, we have to, as a people, come together collectively to, demonstrate in a way that we shock and awe law enforcement. Let's change the tune of the way in which we request for action to be taking place in, in favor of, our lives. And in favor, I'm not saying that we're begging or pleading, but in favor of what we deserve. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and may peace prevail on earth.
Thank you. And we will talk with you soon. And you have a wonderful rest of your day. And please stay safe and healthy. And I'll see you later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless.
God bless.